Hello, everybody. Hey, Destiny.
What's up, Lee? How are you?
I'm doing very well. And you might notice our background looks a little different.
Boom. Look at that.
So we
Tell them about our
are,
background, Lee. Tell them about our
yeah.
background.
The reason why our background is very rainbow-esque is because for this whole month of June, so June is Pride Month. And if anybody out there doesn't know what that means, that Pride Month is a month that we celebrate our queer siblings. It's where we should be doing this year round, but we learn about queer history and all of that. And again, it's called Pride because we are being very proud of who we are and who God created us to be as queer people. And so this whole month is going to be dedicated to the queer community and how the queer community intersects with faith and justice and all those great things. So yeah, I'm excited about it, Destiny.
And Lee's being modest. Lee has put together a whole parade of fun for the whole month. Got different lineups like liturgy, music, guests, biblical theology. It's going to be good. Lee's trying to be oh, da-da-da. Like, no, you need to tune in every Tuesday at 6 and see how this is going to be. It's going to be lit. Okay.
It's gonna be a very pride-filled month. So, and I hope whoever out there is watching, it could be a time to learn a little bit if you don't know a lot about queer theology or how to even look at the Bible through a queer lens. We're going to be talking about that next week, and so it could be a learning time for many of you out there. So we're excited about this month. And also, Destiny, I think we should also tell the people about what's coming up in the future, because Destiny, and you know about this too, about what's coming after this season ends. Our curriculum.
Ooh, yes. I was gonna say at first I was like, "What's coming, Lee?" I do know about this. This is yes. So you wanted it, and we provided. We have gotten a couple of requests about how can we take these conversations into the church? So Leah and I have come together and made some curriculum off of some of our COVID conversations about social justice that you can watch our videos, do different dialogues and activities and read scriptures and Bible studies together. So that way you can start having these dialogues, even if you're still meeting in person or meeting on Zoom. You can take them back to your congregations, your meetings, your UCARE groups, small groups, youth groups, whatever. You can adapt it and have those conversations. And as always, Lee and I are available if anyone wants to reach out to us. We are available as of right now through Zoom only, through Zoom only. But we can pop in and help facilitate any of those conversations too. Thank you for that plug, Lee.
Yeah, so look out for that coming out this summer. So keep an eye out. But with that, we should welcome our guest to begin our celebration of Pride. So hello, guest, and welcome. So we are welcoming Shelley Donaldson, Kim Rodrigue, and Shanea Leonard. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Hello.
Shanea, I am loving those glasses. By the way,
they are.
Thank you.
So great.
Wonderful vision company in Pittsburgh.
Love it. I love it. So, guests, we are here to celebrate Pride, and to get us started, we would like for y'all to introduce yourselves first. So we're going to go clockwise, I think. So we'll start with Shelley, Shanea, and then Kim. So introduce yourself to the world out there.
What are the things the world wants to know?
Where you're at, whatever you want us to know.
Anything you feel is relevant.
Whatever's on my heart, as I tell my youth. I am Shelley Donaldson. I am the Associate Pastor for Youth and Mission at the Presbyterian Church in Stamford, Connecticut, which I am not from Connecticut. I'm actually from Atlanta, but my wife and I find ourselves in Connecticut, and we love it. Who knew New England could be so lovely? I also get to do a lot of work with the Presbyterian Youth Workers Association and PMA with the Presbyterian Mission Agency, coaching youth pastors and youth workers on things from anti-racism to LGBTQIA plus issues. So yeah, I do some writing. I'm actually working on an MFA at the moment because that's what happened during COVID is I was like, I'll go back to school. Why not? So I'm working on an MFA in illustration now. So that's my like latest fun project. So, and there's lots of birds behind me. You'll notice I'm in what we call the cat room. So it's just got lots of plants and pillows, and we have bird feeders everywhere. So you may see some birds in the background.
Love it. A little bit of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Shanea, tell us about yourself.
Hey, y'all. My name is Reverend Shanea D. Leonard. Pronouns are they, them. I am the Associate for Gender and Racial Justice and the newly minted and formed Office of Gender, Racial, and Intercultural Justice, where I do that work with my super justice wonder twin, Denise Anderson. I am currently sitting in my car. Sorry about that, but it's all good. I pulled over and am joining you from there. And I don't know what else you want me to tell you. I will always never miss an opportunity to say that I'm from the wonderful city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, even though I reside in Louisville, Kentucky. So shout out to Philly.
Welcome. And Kim, welcome to the show. It's really good to see you.
Thank you, Lee. It's good to see you too. My name is Kim Rodrigue, and I am newly honorably retired. So that just happened. It's kind of exciting. I was ordained in 1987, and since then have served 6 churches, 2 in Nashville, 2 in the New Orleans area, and 2 in the Washington, D.C. area. So I'm currently in New Orleans, and my wife is serving at the church down the street. When I was 36 years old, I surprised myself and everyone else in my life by falling in love with a woman because, well, that wasn't my life before then, and then it was. And she was on Presbytery staff, and I was serving a church, and that was complicated, and it's become less complicated since then. And I once was Lee's pastor, which was an honor, and I'm glad to be with y'all today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and for introducing yourselves and letting the audience know a little bit about your context that you're coming from. To jump off or start off our episode, what is pride? What is pride to you? What is pride in your context? We here at Just Talk Live like to educate our audience. You know, there might be somebody scrolling through like, "Ooh, what's that?" You know, and they might not know what pride is. So before you get your personal definition, maybe just give a little context and then talk about pride and what it means to you. And we'll go the same order this time around as well.
Oh, I thought I was going to get the benefit of going after Shanea.
Nope.
Like Shanea's going to say what it is, and I'm just going to go off them. So pride. So when I was growing up, in Atlanta, pride it was always in June. And as a kid, I actually thought pride was like, because June's my birthday month. And the Pride Parade always fell on like the Father's Day weekend down there, which was typically my birthday. So most of my life, I associated Pride with my birthday, and I still do. So, I don't know that I understood Pride when I was a kid, though, until I was in high school. But, Pride for us was always, it was always a lot of fun. It was bright, it was colorful, and it was just sort of a normal thing that you celebrated every year because everybody in the city celebrated it. And so, yes, I think for me, pride, I didn't really learn to embrace what pride was until I came out after about 26 years old. I think I knew before then, but I didn't officially come out until I was about 26. And my wife and I we love Pride. When we lived in Chicago, it was hard because it was so loud, and I'm an early to bed person, and so we had a hard time like going out and celebrating with people, but it was always fun. And now we're starting to celebrate it here in Stamford, Connecticut. I'm actually on the community group that is going to put on Pride for the first time here in Stamford. And I'm super excited about that because I think it really is, it's a recognition of a massive community. And it's an opportunity to, to have some time to celebrate. I like to think I celebrate being queer all the time, but it's that sort of recognition that you get to have, and everybody puts up rainbow flags, and it's bright and it's colorful. And so, I think Pride is a great time to educate people. It's also a great time for folks to sort of have an excuse to be themselves other times they might not get to. I was always fascinated in college when people would celebrate Pride, but they weren't out. But Pride Month for them was a time when they could sort of be out for a little while because it was this accepted thing in the South, at least down in Georgia, where you could be out for the month of Pride. And that was kind of a great thing to be able to have that when you otherwise wouldn't get to have it. So yeah, that's my answer to what Pride is.
I don't know if why you want to go after me, Shelley. Like, okay.
You're always so wise. You always have the wise things to say.
Oh, I hope so. I appreciate that. But so for me, Pride, first of all, is political. Pride is a time of resistance. It started out that way. Let us not forget Stonewall and what happened in New York. I specifically lift up the names of the trans women of color who helped to make it possible, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, our elders, our ancestors. We couldn't have Pride without them and others making it possible. And I especially lift up their names because not only is Pride political in the sense that it's an act of resistance against society's norms at that time and what was acceptable and not acceptable, but also even within the queer community, they were almost silenced, and they were ridiculed, and they were pushed out by folks, specifically cisgender white gay men who didn't want their voices to be heard. And so I lift up their names specifically. Pride for me is a time of remembrance for those who have paved the way so that we can live in the liberties that we live in, knowing full well that we don't have every aspect of freedom that others have, but we do have some things that have been accomplished. So it's a time of remembering those who paved the way and made sacrifices so that we can be here. And then Pride is a time of celebration because we have overcome some things and we have made it thus far. This is not a monolithic community by no means, which is part of the reason we even have Black Pride, which is Pride because for so long Pride was very racist and Black folks and brown folks didn't always feel welcome. But then also Pride is a time of education because let's not forget that there is a whole system that's trying to shut down trans rights across this country, and it's happening and it's being successful. And so Pride is a time to educate about ignorance and ways in which we are still fighting a battle just to be accepted and just to live as who we are. And it seems like, and I want to lift this up real quick, that it seems like our trans siblings are the last folks that it's okay to discriminate against legally and violently, and that is not okay. And so Pride is a time to raise that in the room as well. And so that's what Pride is for me. It always has been. I've celebrated. My church was fully out when I was pastoring in Pittsburgh. I was the chair of the City of Pittsburgh's LGBTQIA Advisory Council, and I've done trainings with police officers and even the warden at a county jail around ways of being inclusive. And so for me, Pride is even more of a time to elevate that message of who we are, and not to be super cliche, but we're here, we're queer, get used to it. That's what Pride is.
Well, that's a lot to follow. So I not only live in New Orleans now, but I grew up in New Orleans. So I am from a place that has parades all the time, big parades. And for me, Pride was just one more parade when I was growing up. I think our kind of the difference in our ages probably shows in how we experienced it at first. So when I unexpectedly fell in love with a woman was in the middle of the time that the church, the Presbyterian church, was a very unwelcome place to be, and was charges were being filed against people left and right. And at that point, the person who was doing most of those charge filings was in the same presbytery that I was in. So Pride in DC happened about a mile and a half from the church I served. And it was not, the church wasn't safe at the time, but I could walk around Capitol Hill and go to Pride fully confident I wasn't going to run into people from my church, and feel like it was a place that I could be less scared, and that my wife and I could be a couple. So the experience that sticks with me that, you know, was foundational for me was that, okay, Pride was over here and the church was over here, and the safest thing to do was to keep those things separate. And I feel like we're still figuring out how to bring them together.
Yeah, and that brings me to the question that this show always asks is, how does faith intersect? Because as Kim is describing, and many times when people think of Pride, they don't necessarily think of church, and they don't necessarily think of faith, and they don't necessarily think of those things, and rightfully so. The church has had a terrible history when it comes to our queer siblings, and should be held accountable for that in many, many ways. But I also know that and the prides that I have been in, I have seen an increased amount of presence in with some churches being there. And I wonder, how do we cultivate that more in the church, and how do we bring that about, that like that meeting place of pride and church, as Kim was saying, that to meet those things together, because I think that could be a beautiful thing. But what do y'all think? And we'll go reverse order. We'll start with Kim, Shanea, and then Shelley.
Well, I think it could be a beautiful thing, and the places where it is happening, it is a beautiful thing. And I think that the onus is on the church to get out there and be, the church needs to be proud of its queer folk and of people in the community, and to make the effort to be at Pride events. But gosh, it can't be just in June, you know, and it can't be just the day of a festival or the day of a parade. People who have been kind of pushed aside by the church need to feel that kind of extravagant welcome every day.
Yeah, I think this is why I came to work at the Presbyterian Center, to have these conversations about issues around raising the the awareness and the consciousness of what it means to be a faithful person who is fully out, fully themselves, and then also how we can help the church live into what it has proclaimed through General Assembly. And so, I put out an article today about pronouns. There's an article coming out about the Pride celebration that's going on denomination wide. We have a graphic that has gone out today on our social media, which is something that's never happened, but I pushed it out from my office that says the Presbyterian Church USA celebrates Pride. When have we ever done that as a denomination? And so this is an opportunity and a pivotal moment for the church to, once, like Kim is talking about, stand up and not only just practice what it preaches, but take an affirmative stand for those who are often most marginalized in our communities, especially those who are queer and sit in Black and brown bodies, who are doubly marginalized in some ways. And so understanding that, yes, Lee, as you mentioned, there is a problematic past, and the church must reckon with that, sit with that, and make atonement for that. We need to be especially clear about that. That was a slip, but that was great. But also, this is a time for the church to really affirm what we say on paper in ways that are live throughout the country. And I must shout out that when I was pastoring, there were several churches who was beside me at Pride, and I appreciated that. And I am working to see how we can make our national office at Pride in Louisville as well. So
Very cool.
I think the idea of, the church having more of a presence at Pride, it's one of those things that when I think about it, it's really exciting. But I also think about it and I get kind of tired because I think that there's so many times that I want to say to the straight cisgendered folks in that I work with, you do it. Like, stop leaning on your lesbian pastor to further the gay agenda, whatever you want to call it. Like, stop leaning on me. Like, I have other gifts and talents I can do. I'm tired. And I'm not saying that my community now does that. They really are lovely about not doing it, but that is my experience in the church, is that nobody wants to, so many people don't want to take the step to try to start to integrate the two. And, they look to the LGBTQA plus community to like pick the mantle up and help to integrate the church when it comes to things like Pride. And I think a lot of queer folks in the church already serve as curriculum for people, already sort of serve as, that's the person it's like when you go to your friend of color and you're like, tell me about this part of your community so that I can make our church, better. It is like, it's like that. And I'm not trying to trivialize that for anybody, but it is that feeling of, you're the expert that can speak for all the queers. And I'm like, I cannot. I have a very particular experience and I can speak for myself. And so, when I see other churches that are like at Pride, or that they have an LGBTQA plus committee, because we're Presbyterians and we love a good committee, there's a part of me that's a little jealous of that, because I think I wish more people took that initiative and didn't just lean on that community to sort of make those steps. And so I love that there are churches that are a part of that. I wish that more churches did that. And I wish that it wasn't always the queer people in the room that had to bring it up. And so I think about Pride and about the church and how they can come together. And I sort of get it just sort of makes me feel tired, because I'm like, oh, I got to have this conversation again. Does somebody else want to do this? So not to like belittle it or anything, because I love being able to walk in Pride up in Norwalk or wherever around here with my collar on and, walk with my wife hand in hand so that people can see, like, hey, this is what the gay agenda looks like. We're totally normal. We go to bed at 10 o'clock like so many others. Like, there's nothing too bizarre about us. It's good to sometimes be that example for young queer kids or other folks who, they need to see that. But at the same time, I wish more non-LGBTQIA plus folks would pick up the mantle.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley, for lifting up that statement. And it kind of, you all have actually touched on it. And we have a comment in the chat, a question in the chat, but also you all been kind of answering this question the whole night long, but want to honor the chat. Kim, with you talking about parallel tracks of the church, but not really intersecting of the two, and Shanea lifting up resources, and Shelley, just your whole, your journey on being a pastor and how other people need to be accountable. And we see it, like you said, within other communities, but specifically for the LGBTQ plus community, why do they need to be present in the church is the comment from the chat. Yeah. And that's a good one. I'm gonna let y'all think on that, unless y'all ready to jump in.
Question.
And Lee, I'm gonna let you answer this one. And I know you're not part of the panel, but I'm gonna let you jump on this one too. But let our panelists go first. I know you got some thoughts.
Go ahead,
Shanea.
I'll jump in if nobody else wants to go first. My answer with that would actually be probably, first of all, I would reverse it. I think the church needs queer people more than queer people need the church. And I want to say also that at least from my particular context, the church has always benefited from the presence of the LGBTQIA community in many ways. Once again, from my context, there would be no gospel music if it wasn't for all the queers, those who are out and those who are not out. The richness and diversity of tapestry that is the queer community has always been a part of the fabric of the church. Even if we talk about the public ministry of the church, there will be no Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., without Bayard Rustin, a whole queer Black man. And so, the church has always needed the queer community. I think that the marriage that is problematic, but that can happen between the queer community and the church is one of mutual gain and mutual respect and community. I talk in the Theology, Formation, and Evangelism department has a new resource out called The 8 Habits of Evangelism. And I wrote a chapter in there about radical welcome. And so in radical welcome, it's this whole idea of what does it mean for the church, even as the church stands as a representation of Christ in the community. What does it mean to be in community and partnership and togetherness with those who are the other, those who are marginalized, those who are on the peripherals of a lot of things? And though the queer community has made many advances in some places, to be out and to be loud and proud is still a stigma and still could get not only your ass beat, but it could get you killed. And so we have to acknowledge that in the room, because everybody's context is not a healthy or safe context. And so the church has an opportunity to stand up as a witness of Christ in the community and be that ally, be that partner, be that person or that institution that says we love you just as God made you. And our partnership lies in the fact that not only you are accepted, but you're affirmed here. And you have the opportunity to blossom, to grow, and be planted here in faith so that you can fully become all that God has called you to be in a place of community. That's where the church and the queer community have an opportunity to dance the perfect dance, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would have to say I appreciate that. Thank you. I think, yeah, and I read the question like, why does the LGBTQ plus community need the church? And my knee-jerk reaction is to say they don't. They don't need the church. Look at the history. The history is that the church has been harmful. And I know that there were times where I wanted to walk away. There were times I tried to walk away. And I came back one time after a year of therapy, of figuring out what was right for me. And so I think of it in a sense like a marriage. I don't need to be married to my wife, but I'm a better person when I'm with her. And so in a sense, I do need to be with her because I'm the best version of myself. And so I think the church needs the LGBTQIA plus community, because if the church really wants to live into, the fullness of God, of really embracing all of God's creation, then the church needs the LGBTQIA plus community. But, the queer community has existed without the church for a long time. And so I don't know that I can honestly say that the queer community needs the church. I think that, you mutually benefit from one another. But I think you can't get around the fact that, historically the church has not been kind, to our community. And so, yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. I don't think I can honestly say, yeah, the LGBTQ church community needs the church, but you know what? The church is a much better place with it, when the queers are used.
Can I agree with Shelley? I just want to say my comment is in agreement with Shelley.
So I actually would agree with both Shelley and Shanea. And, what I find myself thinking is that I think that the church used to be able to say to the larger community that a certain group of people were okay or good or should be accepted. And the church doesn't even have that role in our culture anymore. And so the question does make more sense to me to reverse it, to talk about what the church needs. Because I'm not really clear about what the LGBTQ plus community needs from the church, except I love Jesus. And I do believe that being part of a group of people who are honestly trying to follow Jesus, that for a lot of us, that's a good thing. And that the church is a place that hopefully we're doing that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lee.
Well, I was just going to say, for me, it depends on what you mean by church. For me, a church is not a place of hate. The church is not a place of exclusion. The church is not a place where you condemn queer people to go to hell. For me, that might be the institutional church, but that is not the church that I think of as a beloved community. And so if that's what we mean by church, then no, the queer community needs nothing from that space. The community needs nothing from that institution. Nobody needs anything from that. And so it all depends on what we define as what church is. And I left the church. I didn't go to church for years in college. I may have told people I did, aka family. Little Southern boy did go to church. But it took me a long, long time to come back. And I don't know how, and I never will, other than to claim that the Spirit led me back, led me to some space where I could conceive it being somewhat church, because I found a community of love and inclusion and what I thought of as the church to be. So I do think it really is, the queer community doesn't need anything from an institution that has historically just condemned and continues to do. I don't want to to say, like, and even more so now. I'm in Tennessee right now, and Tennessee just passed anti-trans legislation, and some of the worst in the country, and will continue to do so on the basis, and they may not say this, but on the basis of faith, and they cannot deny that. And so as they continue to do that, that faith, whatever that is, that church, whatever it worships, and for me, it worships not a God of love and not a God of anything that for me is life-giving. And so for me, it is all depending on what we define as like church to be. So, yeah. We have another question though from the comments that does play into this conversation a lot when we're talking about pride. And yeah, it kind of fits into this as what are some ways to help eradicate toxic masculinity in the church? And that is something we have seen throughout history. One of the main instigators of the hate against the queer community. So yeah, that's kind of a random one to throw out there, but it does connect. So from our panelists, so whoever wants to kind of hop in on that for the person who's asked.
We'll do Shanea, then Shelley, since Shelley wanted to follow Shanea, and then we'll end it with Kim.
I actually was going to let somebody else answer.
I chose you.
Thank you, Destiny. I will be forever grateful later on. Don't you worry. So I think that getting toxic masculinity out of the conversation comes from an understanding of the text that is not based in super ultra conservative traditional stance. Understanding that when we read the text, even in its original languages, there are other ways in which we understand our language around God, and thus when we open up our language around God, we open up our understanding and language around humanity. Once that is possible, and we remove the homophobia and the sexism from the conversation, then we're able to remove toxic masculinity from the conversation. Because even within the queer community, toxic masculinity runs rampant. I don't care who you are. And so understanding that there is, number one, that gender is a social construct, and that gender norms are not something that we need to adhere to, either in relationships or in how we live our lives. And then understanding too, as well, that when we live into the freedom that Christ has given us, it allows us the freedom to remove ourselves from the social construct that so easily beset us. And so that's when we open up our mind, we open up our freedom and liberty in Christ Jesus, and we open up the door for toxic masculinity to get the hell out.
Amen. I don't, this actually, I feel like such a negative person right now, but I mean, the church was built on toxic masculinity. Like it's part of the foundation of it. And so I don't know if we ever can get rid of it. I think we can, because I'm a hopeful person. I believe that we can. And so to get rid of it, I think requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of intersectionality, because it's not just, cisgendered white men who are living out that toxic masculinity. It is, it's female identifying folks. It's our transgender siblings. We all live into it in some way because it's been our norm. It's embedded in so much of the church. And so, I'm always shocked whenever I say, like, God the parent, there's always somebody there that is like, Father, it's Father. And I'm like, maybe for you it is. That's great. Like, so excited for you that that's your reality. But that's not everybody's reality. And so, I think it's a slow process, and it's a chipping away at our theology, at our liturgy, at our music, at our programming, at just, it's the way we talk to each other. So much of it is steeped in that. I think about like coffee hours. after church, which are pretty much non-existent now. So maybe the death of coffee hour after COVID is going to help fix this. But I think of coffee hours. Who are they run by? They're run by the like older ladies in the church typically. Where and I feel like so often when I was growing up in the South, you know, you had the older ladies running coffee hours and all the socials and things. And who were they teaching to take over one day for them? They were teaching the younger women to do it. And so it was this, I remember having a friend of mine in church, we grew up together, and he was like, I want to help with coffee hour. And the guys were like, we don't do that. I remember his dad telling him he couldn't help with coffee hour. He had to do the one Sunday a month when the dads or the men of the church would buy donuts for everybody. Like that's what the men did. And so it's a little by little thing. It's one thing at a time. It's not going to be solved overnight. And I don't know if we can fully get rid of it, but we sure as hell can try.
Yeah. We model something else and we don't let it go when it keeps rearing its head. I think it's that simple, though not easy.
Yeah, Lee, did you want to jump in on this one? Okay, cool. So we been talking, a lot about, what the church needs to do, but what would you say to maybe a congregation who is scared to take those steps, especially in our community today? Like there's a lot of people who are scared to get it wrong, or, they don't want to be canceled, or, some of that culture that we kind of play into. So what resources, what advice, what ways can they start to, one, educate themselves before they start really trying to go out and go forth to do the work? In whatever order. And Lee, you can jump in too. Lee, you can jump in whenever you want. I'm gonna let you jump in whenever you want to.
I think we should start with Shelley.
Okay.
All right, Shelley, go.
Well, I think it's important to remember, like, we're always going to mess up, that we're human. We're always going to mess it up at some point and get it wrong. I don't think the biggest problem comes in messing up. I think it comes in afterwards of what do you do about it? When you use the wrong pronoun for somebody, don't just pretend it didn't happen, but say, oh, excuse me, sorry, redo it, then go on. Like you correct yourself and move on. And so I don't think we're always going to get it perfect, but we have to try. And at some point you do have to get it right. Like at some point you got to learn the lesson at some point. I have some empathy for those congregations that are afraid to jump into it. I'd rather be in conversation with a congregation that's afraid to jump into it because they don't want to get it wrong than a congregation that's like, we already dealt with that. We did it. It's done. For me, that's a harder conversation to say, like, no, it's still important that you talk about this. So I would rather be in conversation with a church like that just because they're thinking about it. But there's so many resources out there. The first place, if a church came to me and said, hey, how do we do this? We don't want to get it wrong. The first thing I'd do is I'd send them over to More Light. Send them to More Light Presbyterians. You can't go wrong with those folks. They have resources. They're always growing. They're always changing. There are resources out there. There are people to talk to. Nobody has to walk this road alone. And I think as Christians, that's part of our responsibility is nobody should walk the road alone. So yeah, I think that, it's okay to, to not be perfect at it, but the question is, are you messing it up because you're not really paying attention or you're not really trying and you're just using that as your cover so that you can say that, oh, look, we did this thing over here? Or are you genuinely trying? Is your heart in it? So I don't fault those communities. But where's your intention coming from? That's my answer.
Okay, Kim or Lee, because Shanea's giving y'all the stare down.
Shanea's holding out on it.
What you got?
I'll go last. Kim, please.
I think I think I would share experiences that, I mean, if a church were to talk to me in that situation, of churches that I've been a part of that became more affirming in my time with them, or even in the years since then. I would have people talk with people who have struggled with it and churches that have struggled with it. I agree with pointing people toward more light. I think for way too long, the Presbyterian Church has done a lot from a position of fear, and that some congregations still have that sense that, you know, what if they upset Ethel or, you know, Carl, and there really are real people I have in mind whose names I just used for what that's worth. You know, moving beyond being held captive to that kind of nervousness about what if you upset someone is a really important part of being able to be about something. I mean, nobody really, queer or not, wants to be part of an institution that's afraid. It's not very appealing.
And in connection with that, I would say that it's important for that church that's considering this or teeter-tottering on the idea to do their work first. That I would say that you really need a time of discernment and prayer and Bible study and conversations and congregational meetings and all of that around, number one, what is your purpose, right? At the end of the day, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to bring queer people in for the purpose of using them for more money in the collection? Like, what is the purpose? Or are you really trying to create a more beloved kingdom of God? And so you really need to discern that for yourselves, because you're right. You're going to have the Carls and the Ethel and Agnes and Keisha's who are just not going to be okay with that. And so I encourage discernment, because you got to be able to stay strong in your conviction before you enter this process. And then along with that, don't wait till there's a queer person in your church that's been harmed before you do it. That's the wrong time. That is not when you do it. You do it before. You be proactive instead of reactive in that conversation. And if we really are the church, it quite frankly shouldn't be a conversation, because we're supposed to be open and affirming for whosoever will. Remember that part? Yeah, that part. Yeah, so don't forget that in the conversation. So once again, be proactive, and then also enter into the time of discernment. Make sure you think this out. It's not just about a one-time thing, like we said earlier about just June. It's about a commitment to really extending radical welcome and hospitality. And then finally, don't be afraid to go outside of your church walls and church doors to show yourself affirming. It takes more than just putting up a flag outside your building. It takes a real commitment to be an ally to a community who has been severely hurt, harmed, and wounded by your institution.
Yes, and if I could jump back in just for a second, and please don't say that you're welcoming and not mean it. It is way better to say nothing than to, in effect, lure people in with false promises. Just don't do it.
That's the worst, is when you talk to a church. Like, I remember looking for my call now, and I interviewed with so many churches, and people don't understand that, you know, when a church says, oh, we're welcome, we're open and affirming, we're welcoming, you got to like spell that out, because the rest of us, we've been taught to be wary of those terms. Yeah. You know, you can be welcoming all, you know, as much as the day is long, but what's that mean to you? Because there's always, that could have a different meaning for somebody. They could say, sure, we're welcoming. We'll let the queers sit in our pews. Are you welcoming to let us, you know, do your liturgy? Would you welcome us in the pulpit? And so you got to be explicit about that, because there is nothing worse than that switch bait. That's like, you know, suddenly finding out that like, oh, I thought you were a safe place, but you actually like me. You want me in these pews, but you want me to be a certain way. And if I can't be fully who God made me to be, why am I here?
Can I just jump back into, because you made me think, like, there have been times when I've had conversations with congregations in the workshops that I do around racism, but they don't want to have the conversation and take my workshop on gender and inclusion. So you'd be surprised how many folks are open to having conversations about race, but not about this, and vice versa, by the way, and vice versa. So yeah, you got to be really intentional about what it means to create kingdom. And come to on July 13th. Here's a plug. I'm doing a workshop for gender and inclusion.
Cool.
It's open to everybody.
Yeah, go take it. And I would just echo that. And I also think that in the experience that I've had, and some here in Nashville, where there have been welcoming churches, you notice how you notice the conditions of welcome. The queer people look the same. The queer people dress similarly. There's not a lot of intersectional thinking when we're thinking about welcoming. And when we say intersectional thinking, it's like, I mean, how our sexualities and gender intersect with race and classism, like in class and economic status and all these things that I think we like to compartmentalize in the church and not connect. And when it comes down to it, homophobia, transphobia, queerphobia is rooted in white supremacy. And that is where racism comes in, and then classism and all of these things. And so there has to be intersectional thinking. If we're going to be welcoming, we need to say, like, oh, we are welcoming queer people, but why are they all white, and why are they all middle upper class? Why are they all have all the same status and everything else? Why is it like a monotonous view of what queer can be? And so that's where the conversations don't get talked about in these places. Or cisgender. Yeah. And so I would ask that churches have deeper conversations and not in a way that is capitalistic as to what we can gain, how we can consume queer people, to consume them in our churches, to then create what we think they need to be. It's, for me, the church should be a space of going out and meeting people where they are. Because I'm going to go ahead and tell you, queer people ain't going to come to church, y'all. We have done too much. We have done too much to the queer community. And it is very selfish to think that queer people are going to step foot in churches. People have traumatic experiences, and they have physical reactions to seeing church buildings. They have mental and emotional breakdowns from even thinking about walking into a church. And so I think with that mindset, we really have to get away from how do we gain queer people instead of how do we meet queer people where they are, and actually taking the fact that, yeah, the church has done awful things, and that takes a lot of introspection and a lot of intersectional thinking when it comes to that. But we are coming up on time. We have about 7 minutes left. But since this is Pride, and since there are people out there who may be watching this or who might watch this that are scared, that are figuring things out, that are I always put myself in these situations, and I always almost cry when I talk about this. But if I had seen this when I was younger, I would be completely different. Then my life would have been completely different. And so if we can offer people in the spaces where they are affirmation, anything that you would like someone to know that is struggling or trying to figure things out, or is just, just having a hard time and really wants to find community, I think that would be a great place for us to end, to give affirmation. So yeah, what would you say to them? And we'll do Kim, Shelley, and Shanea. We'll let you close us out.
All right. You are loved exactly as you are. And the Holy One, the one who we call God, loves you exactly as you are. And there are people in the church who are safe and who understand and who love you and want to show you the kind of love that can make a difference and make your life more full right now.
I would say a couple of things. Number one, you don't need the church to be validated to be a fabulous human and be perfect and wonderful in who you are. You don't need the church for that. So if you are in a situation that is unhealthy, if you're in a church that's unhealthy for you, that is not kind and loving and welcoming to you, walk away. That's okay. That's totally fine. You don't need that in your life. I would do the exact same thing. I think the other thing I would say is come find me on Twitter, because I'm always, as my friend Shauna Bowman likes to say, I'm the queen of pep talks. I can give a killer pep talk. It's one of my favorite things to do. And so I've told Lee this before. I have this like side hustle ministry that I don't get paid for, but I love doing it. And I like interact with all these young people on Twitter who are queer, who are totally like want nothing to do with the church. But every now and then I'll get a DM from them, or they'll tweet at me and they'll be like, hey, does Jesus still love me? And I'm like, yeah, heck yeah, Jesus still loves you. And you're fabulous and wonderful. And anybody who tells you different, don't listen to them. They ain't worth your time. So come over and find me at Twitter. I'll always give you a queer pep talk, whatever you need. It's Shelley DT247. But yeah, you don't need the church to know that you're a wonderful, fabulous human. But you deserve a church and you deserve people that will remind you of that on a regular basis. And so don't sell yourself short. You deserve it. You deserve all the good things because, like Kim said, you are beloved and you are good and you were created just as you were. And so don't apologize for that.
So I'm going to start where Shelley stopped and say, remember, number one, that you are fearfully and wonderfully created. Like when the Bible says that, it's talking about you, boo, that you are great and fabulous just how you are. And your total queer self and your total trans self and your total bisexual self and your lesbian and your gay and your gender nonconforming and your pansexual self, all the things. That you are exactly who you are supposed to be. That you do not need to fit into any boxes or any confines of your gender identity, or your sexual orientation. Be free to be who you are. Christ has called us into a place of freedom, and God loves you exactly for who you are, not in spite of who you are. And remember that. And then also, if your family can't get with it, you got family. You ain't alone. You're not alone, and it will get better. If you got questions, hit me up, email me. We all got the same email address at my job. We got the same address, like we all live in the projects together. It's our first name dot our last name at pcusa.org. So it's Shanea is at the screen, .Leonard, Leonard at pcusa.org. I got you. Let's talk about it. When Shelley ain't on Twitter, you come see me, and we'll talk about it together. Because hit her up first. But that you don't have to be worried about somebody else's opinion or somebody else's judgment. That Christ has called you to be who you are, fully yourself in this season right now. So walk in it.
Well, Lee, do you have any final words?
No, because I'll start crying again. But I do appreciate all of you. Yeah, I do. You were saying, Destiny.
I think Shanea said it. I think that's a wrap.
Amen. But again, I do appreciate all the work that y'all do. I did want to shout out. So A Matter of Faith, a Presby podcast, is a podcast produced by Unbound and the Peacemaking Program. And Shelley and Shanea will be on that this week. So if you miss this, they'll be on another thing that will well, but a part of that will be a lot of the resources that they use, and that'll be linked and all that. So I did want to give a shout out to that. But thank y'all for being here, Kim and Shanea and Shelley. Y'all two are wonderfully made and created and divine, and I want y'all to be reminded of that too. So we love y'all and thank y'all for the work that y'all do. But again, it's Pride Month, and every episode will be a queer episode. So next week will be Queer in the Bible, which is going to be real fun. So until next time, we'll see you then.